We're going to have a conversation about ride-hailing services in this country, and these are those apps that you use to call for a taxi or for boda boda and whatever happens. And there's, all those things that people talk about. So now, when these guys came in, we've been running taxi here. We are coming to eat our business. What happens to our business? And then they moved on into, okay, so now these people are colonizers. They're telling us to do this and the other. Let's have that conversation. Linda Ndung'u is the country manager at Bolt Kenya. She's our guest for the next hour. Linda, good morning.
Good morning.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. I love this greeting. This is what we should do every day.
It could be a new thing.
Yes, I love it.
Why not?
Yes.
Sindio? Oh, yeah. Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you for having me.
That's the hot seat of the situation room. How does it feel?
Awesome.
It does, eh?
Yes.
Now, I know that you're running Bolt Kenya, but let's also tell you about whether you're running Bolt in other countries,
yes.
Because there's a bank that can sort you out in this country and elsewhere, and it's called EcoBank. You've heard of it?
Yes.
It's in 35 African countries. That's not all. It's in 4 countries outside Africa. Which ones are those?
The UK, otherwise known as the United Kingdom. The UAE, otherwise known as
Dubai.
United Arab Emirates.
Is it near Dubai?
It's near Dubai.
Next to Dubai.
Well done, City. China and France.
Wow.
Parlez-vous français? Okay? Wow. So those 4 countries outside of Africa, 35 countries in Africa. Wouldn't it be absolutely wonderful? You operate an account today and then you moved to Pretoria tomorrow and you would be able to continue your banking transactions, wouldn't it? Say yes.
Yes.
Exactly. So now, that's what EcoBank has decided. Because you're plugged into this platform, you can move your whole life, but you don't need to move your bank. And you can continue paying bills and you can sort out your issues without having done anything, just so long as you're plugged into the platform. And they've seen, it can be done with your personal things, it can be done with your business operations, it can be done across board, paying your bills. It doesn't have to be a big move just because you did a big move. And because they realize that it's a better way, and because it's a better way, it's a better Africa.
That sounds fantastic.
Safi, karibu sana. To welcome you to the show, C.T. Muga, whose birthday is sometime today.
In 2024.
We'll give you the day's proverb. And he goes to one African country every week, brings us proverbs from that country and a proverb a day. Okay?
Yes.
This week we're in which kingdom?
The kingdom of Swatini. Most people know it as Swaziland. No longer called Swaziland. Changed name. A man who says it cannot be done should not interrupt the man doing it. Those of
A
you
man who says it cannot be done should not
interrupt the man who's doing it. We've got you. When you say it can't be done, we've understood you. And it's okay. It's all right. The opposition is clearly well known. You go and stand in the corner over there and face east. Okay?
And let us continue doing.
Let's continue with those who want to do.
Linda, what's your interpretation of this proverb?
I take it to mean that there are those who see the problems in a situation, and there are those who see an opportunity in a situation. And so the ones who only see the problems, it's good to call it out, because then, you point the others to the opportunity. So point it out, stand over there, pale kwa kona, then let the ones who see the opportunity just run with it and make it happen.
It's a good one.
It's a very good one.
It's a good one. Do you agree?
It's an absolutely good one.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Sure.
Very good. Very good. Linda.
Yes.
Ride hailing. This was a new phenomenon just a few short years ago.
Yes.
And now it's become like it's a normal thing.
Yes.
Right? And it's really, really grown in the country. Tell us from your experience in this, how's it doing? How's ride hailing doing? And what has made it become what it has become?
That's a really good question. So maybe just let me start with a bit of background before I come to the question. I haven't always been in ride hailing. I was a career consultant, as we like to say, for about 10 years plus before I moved into ride hailing. And so I got the privilege of experiencing it from outside, like everybody else. And before I was in it, I was what is this thing? It's back in the day, it was the era of traditional taxis, yellow cabs from the airport. That's what we knew. Moving from place A to place B with a traditional taxi partner, paid for by your company. And so when this new thing came, I was like, okay, interesting. But to my mind, I thought it was a passing fad. Now, fast forward, I'm in the industry. I've been there 2 years plus. And it's really grown, I must say. It's grown in many ways in terms of the size of the business, in terms of the awareness of the business, in terms of the opportunities, the spread in this country alone and even globally, because people see the benefits of ride-hailing compared to traditional private transportation, if I can call it that.
What's the uptick been like?
Quite good, actually.
Yeah.
And the thing that has helped it a lot, especially in this country, is because there's good smartphone penetration. And so typically most people have a phone that can download an app. And so if you have a phone that can download an app, you can take a cab online, you can offer services online. And so because of that, then we've been able to see across board multiple companies coming into that space, offering transportation services, which makes it cheaper. And when it's cheaper, then more people can ride. And that's what has led it to actually just grow over the years.
So with the ride-hailing apps, when they came into the country,
Yes.
it was things of the phenomenal, because you could then, take a cab, and the pricing was a significant drop from what folks were used to, right? So we're looking at less than half in terms of what you would pay over the same distance.
Yes.
How were these apps able to bring the prices so low for the same fuel? You're going over the same distance, but a significantly lower cost. How was this able to be done?
I'd call it an entry strategy, because typically what most online apps will do when they're getting into a new market, new space, the app company will go in and have a lot of discounts. And so then if the price from here to town is 600 shillings, for example, the company will say, you know what, if you ride with us online, you'll only pay 150 and we'll give you a discount for the rest. And then this discount gets reimbursed to the driver. And so the first couple of years for most companies are not profitable years, because what you're trying to do is build up your ridership, get people used to this new way of moving, and then now you can start scaling back on the discounts to kind of bring it back to a level playing field. Yes.
Then that happens quite a bit, because every so often there'll be a new company that comes into the market. And so that one, if they're coming in and the strategy is price, you're always trying to compete on price. So it's a great risk, isn't it?
It is.
Because you get me on board onto your platform.
Yes.
And then somebody else comes and they are offering cheaper rides.
Yes.
And all I need to do to get onto that one is just download the app.
That is true. And over the years, because this has become a real concern, now that there's more players in the space, more competition, then many companies are realizing there has to be something else. It just can't be price. And also, a lot of the customers that we serve are, I would call them discerning customers, right? You want more than just, cheap price. You want a price that fits your pocket, but you also want a nice trip. You want a trip that is safe. You want a trip in a comfortable car. You want to be sure if you request for the trip will happen. So you want reliability. And so many platforms are building on these other value propositions: reliability, safety, in addition to affordability. And also having different categories. You will find that some partners have premium categories. And so you can get in Kenya, we're not yet there, but in some countries you will find your premiums, your Lamborghinis, your all those things as part of a premium offering in a platform. So it's just differentiating to make sure that there's more than one value proposition for any client who wants to use the platform.
What's on your mind, City? A lot.
I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I'm beginning to wonder then, what happens if you don't get the numbers? And at what point do you know you've reached that critical point where the numbers now make sense? and you can now start turning the tide so that you actually now start charging what makes profitable sense?
And that's a very good question. I would say that it varies from market to market. And typically before a player gets into, say you're coming into Kenya, then we look at what we call the addressable population. We look, okay, maybe out of the 10, 15, 20 million people who are over 18 and can actually move from place A to place B and pay money for it, we're going to get X% if we do this for, 2 years, 3 years, 6 months. And then on the flip side, there's probably, 100,000, 50,000 potential drivers that we can onboard. And so this is the bread and the butter. This is what we do every day. We kind of sit through and we look at, okay, how many drivers need to be with us? How many riders need to be with us to get to that point where you actually now not only break even, but it's a sustainable business? Because now free cash is no longer available, if I can call it that. People are very excited about e-hailing when it started. And so there was a lot of money being put into ride-hailing companies because it was new and everybody saw the potential. But since last year, there's been a bit of a cash crunch. And now everybody's not just interested in how many numbers, how many rides can you actually do? People want to know, bottom line, are you profitable? And if I can give an example of some of the big players when they started, they took almost 9 years to break even. Now, the companies that are starting now don't have that luxury of years before you break even. So it's become a bit tighter. And usually this means maybe you need to start a bit smaller. Maybe you need to start with lower discounts. Like you just can't discount the entire trip, for example. If I go back to my example of 600 shillings, if previously someone could discount all the way to 150, now a new entrant might only be able to discount maybe half. Because over time, you want to make sure you're also profitable. It doesn't take you too long to get there.
For those of us who use taxis in an older time, from the time when a taxi by definition had to be a genuinely dilapidated ancient vehicle.
Yes.
One which even before you got in, you pushed it for it to start, then you actually got in.
Yes.
To that point where we now got the yellow lines and what have you. Even when you say the price isn't discounted, strangely enough, it is still cheaper than the old taxis.
That is true, and I like to attribute it to law of numbers, if I can put it that way, because typically what happens in online or e-hailing, if I'm a driver, for example, I can see the value in doing 10 trips for a lower price, because at the end of the day, what comes to my pocket might be more than doing one trip at a higher price. So if this one trip was 600 shillings and these 10 trips were 300 shillings each, at the end of the day, what I get in my pocket is more. And that's the whole premise of e-hailing from the driver perspective. So you do more rides and the price point is lower, but ultimately what you get in your pocket is more.
But then the entry point isn't that difficult for those who want to be in that business.
That's very true. The barriers of entry are here.
Yes, exactly. But then that means that there'll be very many. So when there's that competition, apart from just the pricing,
yes,
the numbers of players, who then join in, that competition alone, it means that the numbers that you see, the numbers of people who want to ride doesn't increase at the rate at which those who want to go be in the business does.
That is true.
So that profit that may have previously been there is now being shared by a much larger
also true
pool of people.
Yes.
And so you'll find that most drivers have several apps.
Yes.
Okay.
We call them multi-appers. Everybody multi-apps. Yes.
So now, at some point, I speak as somebody who utilizes those services regularly, daily.
Yes.
Okay. You will be told, and I always have a conversation with the individuals who are ferrying me from point A to B.
Yes.
They say, yes, you will make a living, but not as much as you used to before. Okay? Now, when they speak, you get the impression they're making a lot more money then. And when you ask, they say, after X number of years, I was able to pay for my car, I was able to even get a second one. They explain to you. It says, now I can't.
Right.
Now, my question is this. In any business, there gets to a point, there's a tipping point to it. When it gets to a point, if it isn't managed well, it stops making sense.
It's true.
What do you think will be the tipping point for this business?
That's a good question. I perhaps would not call it a tipping point. I would call it a pivot or inflection point, because what you're saying is true. The law of numbers only works to a certain extent. Before then, there's too many people, and then we start losing the benefits. And
it's called the law of diminishing returns.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. So when that happens, it's now, like we were saying, is it a problem? Is it an opportunity? And so from the business side of things, some of the things that are coming to the fore is that perhaps then there's need to diversify. And this is why sometimes we tell our partners, you know what, okay, you started with traditional taxi services, but you know what, now you can have, in addition to this, ferrying passengers, you can transport goods. You can be part of our food service. So we're creating multiple avenues where different partners who want to come in, you don't necessarily just have to be ferrying passengers. And this is happening across board with many of the bigger companies, because ultimately it's about creating gainful employment. The partners that we have with us at the end of the day should see the value in being with us, because ultimately if there's no value, then, the business will collapse. Yeah.
So it's promoting e-commerce.
Yes, pretty much.
Basically, just saying that from where you are, you can get a ride if you want to get into a vehicle to move somewhere, or you can get goods brought to you if you have bought something and you want it to be delivered, whether it's goods or even meals.
Yes.
And that's become a big one.
Yes.
And now it's upon you to decide whether you want to use a vehicle, or you want to use a piki-piki, or you want to use a bicycle to have it delivered.
Exactly.
And what works for you.
Exactly.
Now then, it means that you as the app, you have to have all these other, you've got to have the vehicle, the piki-piki, the lorry. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. I want to come into the question of regulation.
Yes.
Previously, the old taxis, you were licensed by then TLB.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And you had KRA, of course, with the licenses and the driver's license and all. Right now, the drivers still, because they own the vehicle, they have to go and get the NTSA stickers.
Yes.
For PSV.
Yes.
And they've got to take insurance for their vehicles. Do you support them in any of those?
So indirectly, I would say, because we do enforce these requirements from a safety and a regulatory perspective. It's we don't encourage our partners to come and join us if you don't have your license, if your car doesn't have the licenses that it needs, if it doesn't have the insurance. And so what we've been doing, and what other players do as well, is then we help them to get their documentation in order. Sometimes this might look like organizing for a day when they can actually maybe go and meet partners at NTSA or wherever they need to get their licensing to get this done. Or sometimes, depending on which vehicle it is, if it's a two-wheeler, if it's a four-wheeler, sometimes like two-wheelers, the finances are a challenge to actually get the documentation that they need. And so we can come to an arrangement with them and say that, if you get your license, after you do X number of rides, then you get a portion of the money back, just to help them get into that space and get fully licensed. Yes.
So who licenses you? I mean, what license does Bolt, for example, have?
Yes.
Because when I get into that vehicle, this guy bought the car. He's fueling his car. He has the NTSA sticker. The driver has the driver's license. He's taken up insurance.
Yes.
And Bolt?
Bolt is licensed by NTSA.
As
So
what?
maybe let me just take a step back and say that, coming to your point of, we have different service lines, if I can call it that, right? We have the Bolt ride hailing, we have Bolt food, and we're about to launch parcel delivery. So these are different service lines, and it's not entirely clear from a government perspective if they should all be regulated by one partner, or one regulatory authority, or multiple regulatory authorities, because in practice, ferrying passengers is a bit different from ferrying food.
Yes.
So it might fall under a different agency in the government wings. So while we're waiting for that, because the biggest business still remains transporting passengers, then we're licensed by NTSA. And this is where we get our license from, as an online transport provider. I believe that's what they call us. Yes.
So what does that come with? What's
It gives us license to onboard our driver partners and get into a contracting arrangement with them, where then they offer services to passengers and we facilitate that transaction. That's the extent of the license.
Okay.
Yes.
So the regulation here is for me to be able to interact with your app.
Yes.
And for your app to be able then to connect me with a driver.
Yes.
I see. We'll talk about that shortly. Continue the conversation. It's 7:30. Our guest this morning is Ndung'u. She is the country manager for Bolt Kenya. We're talking about ride-hailing services, this global, local trends, what's happening in the market, just trying to understand this business and what happens. There are very many areas of concern, for example, regulation, who regulates who's the boss of whom, and when it comes to now using the service itself. Safety concerns for both drivers and passengers and there are many. We'll be asking those questions shortly. Keep it here. We'll be back in a while.
Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
8. Our conversation continues with Ndung'u. She's the country manager at Bolt Kenya. We're talking about ride-hailing services in the country. Bolt is one of them, regulated by the NTSA right now, right, to offer this service of connecting me to a vehicle that will take me wherever I want to go. Other regulators, for example, in power, we have IPRA, that sets a base rate and says, this is how much you shall buy power from the power producers, and this is how much maybe you can, regulate in terms of how you charge your customers. Are you given the same kind of regulations on how much you pay your drivers, how much you charge your riders?
I like that question because it's been a hot question for a while. Short answer is that yes, the regulator has given some guidelines on what pricing should look like. The long answer, however, is this pricing right now is not optimal for both our driver partners or the players in the industry. And how this came about is this space is new, even globally, and there's fewer than 10 countries actually that have regulated this space in terms of giving guidelines as to how we should operate, as to what the price points should be. And so there wasn't much to draw on when our regulator was trying to draft this kind of guidelines. And so what happened is we all came to the table, divergent views, and the final, resolution was finding something that meets everyone in the middle. But oftentimes what meets everyone in the middle is not necessarily the most optimal solution. And why I say this is that now what we have is a cap on how much commission a ride-hailing partner can charge on every trip. And while this is a good measure, sometimes it's not the best thing to limit how much a service or a good can be, right? Because if I just use like a normal service, if you're buying soap at the shop, you can buy a bar of soap for 50 shillings, you can buy a very high-end soap for thousands of shillings. It depends on a lot of factors, right? And so the regulator that regulates consumer goods, if they come in and they say, every bar of soap should be at 500 shillings, then they have restricted the market. Those who have the purchasing power cannot actually buy the higher end goods. And then conversely, then maybe the companies that are making these high-end soaps cannot be in operations anymore. And so while what we have is good for now, there is a need to revise it, because while guardrails are important to ensure that it's a fair playing ground for everybody, it can also stifle business. And luckily for us as an industry, the regulator, the Ministry of Transport, are very open to these conversations, and the driver partners as well, because we've been living with this regulation for a year plus now, and everyone has seen it's not optimal, where nobody's making sufficient money, so to speak. And so we're all back on the drawing board. We've been having conversations with the Ministry of Transport, with NTSA, with our driver partners, and we're trying to see how can we reframe these regulations to make sure that they work for everybody. So that's a work in progress. But there is a baseline for now. Nobody can charge more than 18% commission on every trip.
Who takes precedent in terms of importance? Is it the customer or is it the driver partner for the platform?
Truly the driver partner. In fact, our internal mantra is focus on supply, and supply for us is a driver partner, because if we don't have the people who are offering the service, then even if we have so many people who need the service, there's nobody to provide it. And in fact, every time we have engagements with our drivers, we tell them, if it's not working for you, it's not working for us. It's not even a sentimental thing, it's a business thing. If we don't have our driver partners, we have no business, even if we have the entire country wanting to ride. Yes.
There's always a concern when it comes to public transportation or whatever nature. There are certain categories of public transportation whose notoriety is in the absolute negative. The cab hailing apps. The cab hailing apps haven't gotten there yet, but the question of security has to be asked. When I'm on a trip, people who are in positions such as yourself have a clear idea where the cabs are, where it's going, who that person is, because all those details are there. What are the security features that you people have put in place to ensure that your clients are safe and that your drivers are safe? Because the drivers are also often in great danger from the very passengers that they carry, or people who purport to be passengers.
That is so true. And unfortunately, across the globe, we've seen, on the driver side, a lot of incidences, especially because we have female drivers also. So the safety question is to both passengers and drivers. And we have put in place several features, now speaking as Bolt. Some of the things that we've been happy to launch to aid in safety for our drivers, we have a safety toolkit, we call it, within the app, where first it creates the awareness of what are the kind of situations that you can find yourself in and you are unsafe, right? So that then, if you know, sometimes prevention is a first step to making sure it doesn't happen. And then secondly, we have a feature called an SOS button, which works for both riders and partners, drivers. So this means that if I am in a situation and for whatever reason, I sense that I am not safe, it might not be going in the way that I thought it will be this trip, I can press that button, and in a couple of minutes, somebody will ring you and ask you, hey, are you okay? And we've advanced this feature now such that if the vehicle has been not moving for a while, taking into consideration, traffic and all these things, but we've set the configurations in such a way that, for example, if it's 2 a.m., there's no traffic. So if the vehicle has not been moving for that long, then there is a trigger and a message pops up and asks both the driver and the passenger, are you okay? If they do not respond, then a call actually follows up, because sometimes you're in a situation you cannot respond. So then there's a follow-up call, and if then there's no response, then we dispatch some kind of emergency assistance. We call this trip anomaly, and we keep rolling out these kind of features because we are well aware. As City has said, we're not there yet, but we know that in public transport, when we're dealing with absolutely everybody, then this kind of issues can happen both ways. So we are always trying to proactively preempt what could happen and protect our drivers and our riders.
Do you have data that perhaps informs you as to, while the frequency of incidences that drivers who use your particular app have faced, areas where some of these security issues are more likely to happen, the day, the time, all these details? We
do. And what we do as part of also creating the awareness, we have within the app for our drivers a feature called unsafe areas, because there are areas that we've noticed, these are the areas where there tends to be potential incidences or more triggers. And so we give the drivers the liberty to select if they want to offer a ride, go into these places or coming from these places. So we actually map them and we say that, hey, this area is potentially unsafe. Do you still want to take the ride? Yes.
Okay. Now, with the advent of these apps, There was also then the suggestion that things would come into play like, decorum, proper behavior, politeness, etc. So we reserve the right to demand such a thing, getting into whatever happens in the past was history. Whether somebody wants to be rude to you, if you hailed it on the side of the road, fine. But now with the app, it's expected that you're going to be treated in a certain way, that certain things you don't expect from a driver, you don't expect them to speak in a certain way or behave in a certain way by virtue of the fact that they're on this platform.
True.
However, they still happen.
Yes.
So what is expected of the drivers, because by virtue of the fact that they're on this platform, and what recourse is taken if those things don't happen? Because it is a huge, huge complaint that drivers treat...
They're rude.
It's that drivers treat passengers poorly.
That's true. And what we try to do is we try to manage it from before it happens and then if it happens. So before it happens, before we onboard our drivers, we train them on various things, including and especially customer support. Because at the end of the day, if we have driver partners and I come in and I take a ride and it's a terrible experience, one, I will never come back. And then two, I'll tell all my friends and my family. So nobody will ever use that service again.
And it will not be the driver, it will be the app.
Yes, exactly. So we all lose. And we try and sensitize them because we've realized that sometimes driver partners don't necessarily realize that this is a ripple effect of being rude to one person. We all lose. We lose our clients. We're not able to make money. Everybody is frustrated. Everybody loses in the end. And so we bring them in and we, train them on why is this important. Because sometimes the why is what they're missing. Because, someone will come and tell you, but I'm having a rough day. This person should understand. No, your customer should never understand that you're having a rough day. Like in most service industries, they say the customer is always right. Even when they're wrong, they're right. So we try and instill these kind of values in them for them to understand it's their business. They are entrepreneurs. If they lose that customer, then, it's a loss, maybe for life even. And then, even when it happens, because, people are people, so sometimes it does happen anyway, then there's a host of measures that we have in place to manage this. And depending on the degree of the infraction, if I can call it that, if someone was, said something that's not pleasant, maybe that's a person who can be retrained and kind of reminded that this is not how you operate on the platform. If it was something more serious, then more stringent measures might need to be taken, like you're off the platform for some time to just kind of help you realize that this is not the way we behave here. So there's a whole host of things that we can do to actually manage the behavior.
Is there a way for a rider to actually post a specific complaint?
Yes.
And say, I was in this particular car and this is what the driver did. I've had cases where maybe you were going somewhere and you decided, this is not where I wanted to go, let me change the destination. And the driver just flips and says, they've locked the car, you can't get out, you can't pay, If you were to experience that, how do you report that immediately? So and how do you deal with that driver?
Yes. So for those kind of extreme cases, where someone is being rude, they've locked the car, those kind of things, I would suggest heavily that this is now a safety incident. It's press the SOS button. Have someone remove you from that situation because that is a potentially flammable and dangerous situation. When it's normal, the driver was rude to me, but we finished the trip and all is otherwise well, then we do have in-app. You can report, you can raise a ticket in the app and you can go in and you can say, this particular trip didn't go well, and you can select the reason why. And then you can also write to us. We have an email address and we have a full customer support team on the back end that responds to all these tickets and emails that come in. Yes.
And how well do you know your drivers? What information must a driver give you before you get them on board?
Right. So we know them I like to say to the extent that the government knows them. We ask them for their ID. We ask them for their license. If you're a four-wheeler, a car driver, we ask you for your PSV license as well, because we not only want you to have your driving license, we also want to be sure that the government has said you're fit for public transport. So your driving license and your PSV license. And then we also go the extra mile just because of, rise in safety incidences. We ask them for a police clearance certificate. Then we can be sure that this particular person who's joining us does not have a prior criminal record. So these are the 4 things that are essential for us.
Do you have a photo of the
Oh, yes, and a photo. Yes. So 5 things. Yes.
This police clearance certificate, what exactly is it supposed to do?
It helps us to understand if this person has had a criminal record in the past. Yes.
How?
Because it has a record. If you've been to jail, in your police clearance certificate, I think it's page 2, they write that, or if you were taken to court for whatever reason, then it's there on the second page.
And there's this thing they call certificate of good conduct.
Yes, it's the same. It's that one. It was just renamed, yes, to a clearance certificate. Yes.
Okay.
It's the one.
It's the one.
So, you have called a boat, and the guy comes, different vehicle, or the guy who is using the car, ni anko yangu anatumia gari ameniachia saa hii sababu anaenda kukula, so kukimbisha mahali unaenda, and the person who's come is different. How do I know all these things?
So
I'm now talking about safety for the passenger.
the passenger. We've done over the recent past a couple of things. When you order a trip, you can see, if I'm the driver, you can see my face, you can see my name, you can see the car I'm coming with, you can see the color of the car I'm coming with, you can see the number plate of the car I'm coming with. And so what we recommend to people is, as the vehicle is approaching, already you can see the color. You can, when it comes close enough, you can see the number plate. Before you get in, call the driver by name. That's the most efficient way to actually know if this is the right person. And if it's the wrong person, just cancel. When you cancel a trip, the first thing it asks you is what went wrong. And then you will have those options. And you can say the driver was not the same as the app.
So you should actually then refuse to take the trip. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Do you know what they've said? On several occasions, they say, it's a different vehicle than that which has come, obviously, so it's a different number plate. And they say, well, I was upgrading my vehicle, and Bolt is the one.
To a Bolt or a
they've not put in the system, so I cannot stop my business. I must carry on.
I agree, but I would also suggest that sometimes this is not true, because it could be that case of I want to make some money. I don't have a car. I've taken somebody else's car. And it could be legitimate, right? And the trip will happen and you'll be fine. But it could also be, I'm a thug and I stole somebody's car.
For this purpose?
Yes, for this particular purpose. And that's why to be, better safe than sorry. Because it is true, and we get a lot of feedback that, I used the wrong car and it was fine. It happens, but we always have, every so often, I took a wrong car, and actually it was someone with ill intent, and it did not end well. Because they don't have much to lose. The car is not theirs, they're not the one on the profile. So what they do is they create problems for the person who is attached to that driver profile and to that car. If there's a criminal case, because sometimes it does happen, it becomes now a proper court case if something happened, it's very difficult to find the actual person. If I stole your car and I was using your credentials, you're the one that the police will come after. So it's just to be safe. It's better to not take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in this case, where is recourse? Because I would not have come into contact with this individual if something happened. I would not have come into contact with this individual had it not been that I was on the platform.
That is true.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And if something then went awry, and we had to deal with it, who takes responsibility? This person who we don't even know who they are, because clearly the name on the thing is different from their real name, and and different from the number plate. So who am I even taking anywhere?
Yeah.
But the one that I do know is the platform. I say, excuse me, you sent me a vehicle, and a person who did 1, 2, 3. Who takes responsibility?
So typically that's what happens because your link is with the platform.
Right.
And so you as a rider will bring the complaint to us. And then we now deal with it with the police. Generally, we escalate these cases to the police, especially if it was a serious like assault case or something of this nature, or your wallet got stolen and we don't know who this person is. And so the police come in and then we follow due legal process. And typically what happens is the owner of that profile needs to tell us who this person is, because unless it was a straight out someone, held a gun to your head and took your car, please tell us who this other person was. So in the back end, this is what happens. And another thing that we want to bring in is because, sometimes it happens. You're in a hurry, a car comes and you want to go and all these kind of things. We want to also address, what's the issue? What's the root cause? Why is this happening? And we find that a lot of drivers who do this is they do want to offer the service genuinely, but maybe they don't have a car. And so the only time they can get this car is when their uncle is not using it, when they're on lunch break. And so we are trying to kind of address this kind of underlying issues. And one of the things we're bringing into place is vehicle financing, because then if you want to offer services and you can't actually truly afford a car, maybe you can find a down payment and then we help you to finish your payment over the time that you need to, and we can kind of manage how much it will cost you, because we can tell the people who are bringing the vehicles, this person will be offering rides on our platform, so you know they're not a flight risk. They're going to be paying you on time, which then means in the end it will be cheaper. So we're trying to also understand, because sometimes these things are symptoms of the underlying problem. So we deal with the problem, but then we also try and understand, okay, how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? Yeah.
Any business that wishes to ride the tides of time profitably, we are told, have a research and development department. I'm going with this, don't you?
Yes.
So why don't you just answer?
It's a great question, and I completely agree. We must always be forward-looking and see what next, and how can we keep this business vibrant and growing and beneficial for all parties. And so I mentioned one thing, the diversification into different services. That has come from our research and actually just trying to understand what is it that can help both our driver partners and ourselves and the economies in which we operate. And the other thing that we look at very keenly is sustainability, because, transport is a very interesting space when you look at it in terms of the environment. We contribute a lot to the negative effects to the environment, if I can say that.
Yeah.
Although I would say that maybe we contribute less than private cars, but you know what? We're still there. We're still in that mix. And so we're trying to see how can we be more sustainable? How can we make sure that this business is not killing the earth, even as we continue to grow? And we're moving into spaces like electric bikes, electric cars. This is the future we're looking towards, and this is what our research and development teams are actually actively working on. How can we get into this space faster? How can we make it the norm that we are all going electric and we're moving away from all these traditional vehicle options that are not the best for the environment? Yes.
CRB, Credit Reference Bureau, has its negative side, but also has its positive side. In that, because you're sharing information about the people who are taking credit, now financial institutions get to know a customer. Do you think you need to have something like this as ride-hailing platforms, where you can share information about maybe drivers who are perennial bad-mannered drivers, or clients who are perennial bad-mannered clients, so that you all know, okay, so-and-so comes and applies to be a driver on your platform, please know that this person has been flagged by the other company?
That's a really good point. Fun fact, this is supposed to be happening right now. It's part of the regulations that we are all regulated under within the NTSA guidelines. The truth is, it has been difficult to implement, because the way it was supposed to work is the government was to offer that mechanism so that all of us can plug in. And I can say that, hey, you know what? Amos is a not great driver on our platform because of 1, 2, 3. And so maybe on our platform we have blacklisted him. And so everybody knows. And this was actually from the government, and we thought that was a really good initiative, but we've not been able to implement it yet. Hopefully this is something that will come even as we continue these deliberations, because it is true, sometimes a few bad apples ruin it for everybody else. And so if we can call them out and have them out of the industry, then it will be better for everybody.
Linda, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You've shed a lot of light. Somebody's saying you should be hired as a government spokesperson. You speak very well. Linda Ndung'u is the country manager for Bolt Kenya. She's been our guest. We've been getting to understand this ride-hailing services business, and we've learned quite a bit on what happened in this industry. Keep it here for more conversations. 8 a.m. Good morning.
Spice up your life.